I never thought a snowplow would be the thing that brought down an entire HOA board, but here we are. My name is Aaron Lawson, and I run a small snow removal business in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. The town sits at about 6,700 feet elevation in the Yampa Valley, and we get absolutely dumped on every winter. I'm talking 350 inches of snow annually. For a guy like me with 3 snowplows, 2 front-end loaders, and a solid reputation built over 15 years, that's good business. Real good business. I grew up here, took over my dad's equipment when he retired to Arizona 5 years ago, and I know every road, driveway, and parking lot in this town like the back of my hand. My contracts include the county roads on the east side, several businesses downtown, and about 40 residential properties. But my biggest contract, the one that paid nearly 30% of my winter income, was with the Pine Ridge Mountain Estates HOA. Pine Ridge was one of those planned communities that popped up about 12 years ago when wealthy folks from Denver and California decided they wanted vacation homes in the Rockies. 240 homes spread across 500 acres of mountainside, with winding roads, community centers, and most importantly, 3 fire access roads that cut through the development. Those fire access roads were critical. The Steamboat Springs fire rescue made it crystal clear when the development was built that those roads needed to be passable at all times. We'd had some close calls with wildfires in recent years, and everyone understood that emergency access was non-negotiable. I'd been plowing for Pine Ridge since the development opened. Same routine every winter. When we got more than 4 inches, I'd start with the main entrance and arterial roads, then work my way through the residential streets and finish with the fire access roads. The fire access roads were tricky because they were steeper and narrower than the regular streets, winding up through the pine trees to connect with Forest Service roads above the development. My method was simple and effective. I'd use my big truck with the V plow for the main roads, pushing snow to the sides in neat berms. For the fire access roads, I'd bring in my smaller truck because it had better traction on steep grades, and I'd push the snow downhill off the sides where the terrain sloped away. It was the only practical method because the fire access roads didn't have anywhere else for the snow to go. The roads were maybe 12 feet wide, cut into the mountainside, with the slope rising on one side and dropping off on the other. If I tried to pile snow on the sides like a regular road, within 2 storms there'd be no room left and the roads would be impassable. This had been my method for 12 years. Never a complaint, never an issue. The fire department did their annual inspection every October and signed off on the emergency access. Everything was smooth, until Deborah Kramer became HOA president. I first met Deborah in November when she called me for a meeting at the Pine Ridge Community Center. She was a real estate agent from Denver who'd bought a place in Pine Ridge 3 years ago and apparently decided she needed to run things. Mid-50s, blonde hair styled in that specific way that looks like it requires a standing appointment at an expensive salon, and the kind of voice that always sounded like she was explaining something to a child. "Aaron, thank you for coming," she said, gesturing to a chair across from her in the community center's meeting room. 2 other board members sat flanking her. I recognized Ted Morrison, a retired insurance executive who'd always been reasonable, and Sandra Chen, a lawyer from Denver who spent weekends in Pine Ridge. "No problem," I said, sitting down. "What can I do for you folks?" "We wanted to discuss your snow removal methods," Deborah said, sliding a folder across the table. "I've been reviewing the practices, and I have some concerns." I opened the folder and found printed photographs of the fire access roads from the previous winter. The photos showed exactly what I'd expect: clear roads with snow pushed off the downhill sides into the natural terrain below. "I'm not sure what the concern is," I said. "The roads are clear. Fire department signed off on them." "The concern, Aaron, is that you're pushing snow into our natural areas," Deborah said. "We have covenants about maintaining the natural beauty of Pine Ridge. When you push snow off the side of these roads, you're damaging vegetation, creating erosion risks, and frankly, it looks messy." I stared at her. "Deborah, those fire access roads are cut into a mountainside. There's literally nowhere else for the snow to go. If I pile it on the sides, the roads become too narrow for emergency vehicles." "Other communities manage to keep their roads clear without damaging the environment," she said. "I'm sure you can find a better solution." Ted Morrison cleared his throat. "Deborah, Aaron's been doing this for 12 years without any issues. The fire department has never complained." "That doesn't mean we can't improve our practices," Deborah said, not taking her eyes off me. "We need to be good stewards of our community." Sandra Chen, the lawyer, spoke up. "What Deborah is suggesting is that we explore alternative methods, perhaps hauling the snow away entirely." I nearly laughed. "Do you know what it would cost to haul away snow from 3 miles of fire access roads every time we get a storm? We'd be talking about dozens of dump truckloads. My contract would need to triple, maybe quadruple in price." "That seems excessive," Deborah said. "That's reality," I replied. "Look, I understand you want to keep things looking nice, but we're talking about emergency access. Function has to come before form here." The meeting ended with Deborah saying she'd bring the issue to the full board. I left feeling uneasy. I'd dealt with difficult HOA boards before, but something about Deborah's tone suggested this wasn't going to blow over. 2 weeks later, we got our first big storm of the season. 14 inches overnight, and I was out at 3 in the morning with my crew, tackling our contracts. Pine Ridge was always first because of the emergency access requirements. I followed my usual routine: main roads, residential streets, fire access roads. I pushed the snow off the downhill sides of the fire access roads just like I'd done for 12 years. 3 days later, I got a certified letter from the Pine Ridge HOA. The letter informed me that I was being fined $5,000 for violating HOA covenants regarding environmental damage and unauthorized alteration of common areas. It included more photos of the fire access roads with snow pushed into the terrain below, and cited 3 specific covenant sections about maintaining natural areas. I sat in my office, reading the letter 3 times, my coffee getting cold. $5,000 for doing my job. For doing exactly what I'd been hired to do and what the fire department required. I called Ted Morrison. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Ted, it's Aaron Lawson. I just got a fine from the HOA for $5,000. There was a long pause. "Yeah, I voted against that." Deborah pushed it through. Sandra sided with her. "This is insane. I'm clearing emergency access roads." "I know. I tried to explain that. Deborah's convinced you're damaging property values by making the community look unkempt." He sighed. "She's got this vision of Pine Ridge being featured in some mountain living magazine, and she thinks everything needs to be pristine. What do I do here? You can appeal to the full board at the next meeting. That's in 2 weeks. In the meantime, she's saying that if you continue using your current method, additional fines will be assessed." "So what am I supposed to do when it snows?" "That's the question I asked. She said you need to figure out an alternate method that doesn't involve pushing snow into the natural areas." I spent the next week consulting with other snow removal professionals, the fire department, and even an engineer. Everyone told me the same thing. There was no practical alternative for those fire access roads. The terrain didn't allow for snow storage on the sides. Hauling it away would be prohibitively expensive. My method was the industry standard for that type of situation. The board meeting was held on a Tuesday evening in early December. About 30 homeowners showed up, which was more than usual. Word had gotten around about my situation. Deborah called the meeting to order and worked through the standard agenda items: budget reports, architectural review updates, and covenant violations. Finally, she got to my appeal. "We have Aaron Lawson here to discuss his fine for improper snow clearing methods," she announced. I stood up. "I'm appealing this fine because I was clearing emergency access roads using the only practical method available. I've been doing this for 12 years without complaint, and the fire department has consistently approved my work." "The fire department standards and our community standards are two different things," Deborah said. "We have an obligation to maintain property values and protect our natural environment." A homeowner in the back raised his hand. "I'm sorry, but are we really fining the guy who keeps our roads clear? That seems backward." Deborah's face tightened. "This isn't about whether the roads are clear. It's about the method used to clear them." Another homeowner, a woman I recognized as living near one of the fire access roads, spoke up. "I've lived here for 8 years. Aaron's work has never bothered me. The snow melts in the spring and everything grows back fine." "That's not the point," Deborah said, her voice rising slightly. "We have covenants for a reason." Ted Morrison interjected. "Deborah, I think we need to consider the practical realities here. If we fine Aaron for using the only viable method to clear these roads, we're either going to lose our snow removal contractor or face significantly higher costs for an alternative that may not even work as well. Then perhaps we need to find a contractor who can meet our standards," Deborah said. That statement hung in the air. Several homeowners started talking at once. I held up my hand. "Let me make something clear. I'm not going to pay this fine because I didn't violate any reasonable standard. I was hired to keep emergency access roads clear, and that's what I did. If this fine stands, I'll be taking legal action against the HOA." Sandra Chen, the lawyer on the board, leaned forward. "Mr. Lawson, the covenants are legally binding. The board has the authority to enforce them and assess fines." "The covenants don't override public safety requirements," I said. "The fire department mandates that those roads remain passable. My method ensures that. If you want to fine me for meeting fire safety standards, we can let a judge decide if that's reasonable." The meeting devolved into arguments. Some homeowners supported me. Others seemed to side with Deborah's concern about property values, and still others just seemed confused about the whole situation. Eventually, Deborah called for a vote on my appeal. It failed 3-2, with only Ted Morrison and one other board member voting in my favor. The fine stood. I left that meeting angry but also resolved. I wasn't going to pay a $5,000 fine for doing my job correctly. I contacted a lawyer the next morning, a guy named Richard Foster who specialized in HOA disputes. "This is an interesting case," Richard said after I explained the situation. "The HOA has broad authority to enforce covenants, but they can't enforce covenants that conflict with public safety requirements or local regulations. The fire department's emergency access requirements would likely supersede the HOA's aesthetic concerns. So I can fight this." "You can, but litigation is expensive and slow. It might cost you more in legal fees than the fine itself, and it could take a year or more to resolve." He paused. "There might be another approach." "What's that?" Your contract with the HOA is for snow removal on their private roads, correct? Right. The fire access roads are part of that contract. Yes, they're specifically listed. What if you simply declined to renew your contract, or modified it to exclude the fire access roads? I thought about that. They'd have to find someone else to plow those roads. Exactly. And good luck finding someone willing to do it under the constraints the HOA is trying to impose. Sometimes the best way to win is not to play the game. I mulled this over for a couple of days. Another storm was forecast for the weekend, and I needed to decide what to do. If I plowed the fire access roads using my normal method, the HOA would fine me again. If I didn't plow them at all, I'd be breaching my contract. Then it hit me. The solution was obvious. I drafted a letter to the HOA board, which Richard reviewed. The letter stated that, due to the HOA's determination that my snow clearing methods violated their covenants, I was immediately modifying my contract to exclude the fire access roads. I would continue to provide snow removal services for all other roads within Pine Ridge, but I would not be clearing the fire access roads until the HOA either rescinded their fine or provided clear written specifications for an approved alternative method, along with compensation for any additional costs that method would require. I sent the letter via email and certified mail on Friday afternoon. The storm rolled in Saturday morning. It was a big one, 20 inches by the time it stopped Sunday afternoon. I had my crew out working around the clock. We cleared the main entrance to Pine Ridge, all the arterial roads, and every residential street. We did our usual thorough job. But when we got to the fire access roads, we drove right past them. My phone started ringing Sunday evening. First it was Ted Morrison. "Aaron, the fire access roads are completely snowed in." "I know. I sent a letter to the board explaining that I'm no longer clearing them due to the HOA's position on my methods." Jesus, Deborah is going to lose her mind. "That's not really my problem, Ted. She made it clear my methods weren't acceptable. Until that changes, I'm not touching those roads." Next was Sandra Chen. "Mr. Lawson, you're in breach of contract." "Actually, I'm not. I modified the contract terms due to the HOA creating impossible working conditions. Your board determined that the only viable method for clearing those roads violates your covenants. I'm not going to rack up more fines. If you want those roads cleared, either rescind the existing fine and agree in writing that my methods are acceptable, or hire someone else. We'll be pursuing legal action for breach of contract. Go ahead. I've already consulted with my attorney. You created this situation." Then Deborah called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Aaron, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Her voice was shaking with anger. "I'm doing exactly what your board told me to do. You fined me for my snow clearing method and said I needed to find an alternative. I'm not going to pay fines for doing my job, so I've removed the problematic element from my contract. You can't just stop clearing emergency access roads." "Sure I can. They're on your private property. You're my client. If you're not satisfied with my methods and you're going to fine me for using them, then I'm not going to provide that service." "This is absurd. We need those roads clear." "Then you need to either accept my methods or find another contractor. Those are your options. I'll make sure you never work in this county again." "Good luck with that, Deborah. I've been here 15 years with a spotless reputation. You've been HOA president for 6 weeks. She hung up on me. Monday morning, I got a call from Captain Steve Martinez at Steamboat Springs Fire Rescue. "Aaron, I heard you stopped plowing the fire access roads at Pine Ridge." "That's right. The HOA fined me $5,000 for using my normal method, which they say violates their covenants. I can't afford to rack up more fines, so I've stopped servicing those roads. Jesus Christ, hold on. I heard muffled conversation in the background. Aaron, we need those roads clear. That's not negotiable. I understand that, Steve. Take it up with the HOA. They're the ones who decided my methods were unacceptable. This is a public safety issue. I agree, which is why I hope the HOA will come to their senses. But I'm not paying thousands of dollars in fines to clear roads on private property. Steve was quiet for a moment. This could get serious if there's an emergency and we can't access parts of the development. I know. Maybe you should explain that to Deborah Kramer. Oh, I plan to. By Monday afternoon, the situation had escalated. Steve had called an emergency meeting with the HOA board, and he'd invited me to attend. I showed up at the community center at 4 o'clock to find Steve, 2 other fire department officials, Deborah, and the other board members already there. Steve didn't waste time with pleasantries. The fire access roads are a condition of Pine Ridge's occupancy permit. When this development was approved, the developer agreed to maintain 3 emergency access routes that meet our specifications. Those roads must be passable within 12 hours of any weather event. It's been over 24 hours since the storm ended, and those roads are still completely blocked. That's because our contractor refused to clear them, Deborah said, shooting me a look. Your contractor refused to clear them because you fined him for using the appropriate method, Steve said. I've reviewed Aaron's work on those roads for years. His method is exactly what we'd recommend for that terrain. It violates our environmental covenants, Deborah insisted. I don't care about your covenants, Steve said, his voice hardening. I care about life safety. If we have a fire or medical emergency in the upper sections of this development and we can't access those areas because your fire roads are blocked, people could die. Do you understand that? Sandra Chen spoke up. Captain Martinez, certainly there's a compromise here. Perhaps Mr. Lawson could use a different technique that would satisfy both the fire department's requirements and our community standards. There isn't, Steve said flatly. I had our engineer look at those roads. Aaron's method is the only practical option. The roads are too narrow and steep for snow storage on the sides. Hauling the snow away would take days and cost a fortune. Pushing it downhill into the natural terrain is the correct approach. But our covenants, Deborah started. Will get people killed, Steve interrupted. I'm not here to debate this. As of right now, Pine Ridge is in violation of its occupancy permit. If those roads aren't cleared within 24 hours, I'm going to recommend to the county that we start proceedings to revoke the permit until compliance is achieved. The room went silent. Ted Morrison finally spoke. What does that mean exactly? It means the county could potentially prohibit occupancy of the homes until the fire safety issues are resolved. They won't do that immediately, but it starts a process. At minimum, it goes on the public record that Pine Ridge has fire safety deficiencies. That's going to affect property values a lot more than some snow pushed into the woods. Deborah's face had gone pale. You're threatening to make our homes unlivable. I'm not threatening anything. I'm explaining the consequences of failing to maintain required emergency access. This is serious, Mrs. Kramer. Steve turned to me. Aaron, if the HOA rescinds their fine and agrees in writing that your method is acceptable, will you clear those roads? Yes, as long as I have that agreement in writing and they commit to not fining me in the future for using proper snow removal methods. And for the record, the fire department will provide a written statement that your method meets our requirements and is the appropriate approach for those roads. Deborah looked at Sandra Chen. They had a whispered conversation. Finally, Deborah turned back to us. Fine. We'll rescind the fine, but I want it noted that we're doing this under duress and that we still believe there should be a better solution." "Note whatever you want," Steve said. "Just get those roads clear." I had my crew out on the fire access roads by 6 that evening. The snow was deeper and heavier after sitting for more than 24 hours, but we got the roads cleared by midnight. I documented everything with photos and timestamps, just in case. The next day, I received a formal letter from the HOA rescinding the $5,000 fine. The letter was terse and included a paragraph about how the board was acting in response to fire department requirements, not because they agreed with my position. I didn't care. The fine was gone. I also received a letter from Steve Martinez, on official fire department letterhead, stating that my snow removal methods on the Pine Ridge fire access roads met all emergency access requirements and represented industry best practices for the terrain involved. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. 2 weeks passed. We had a couple of smaller storms, 4 and 6 inches, and I cleared all the Pine Ridge roads including the fire access routes without incident. Then, in mid-January, we got hit with another big storm. 18 inches with high winds creating significant drifting. I was out with my crew from 2 in the morning until late afternoon, working through our contracts. We cleared Pine Ridge completely, including the fire access roads. I was exhausted by the time I got home, grabbed a quick dinner and crashed into bed. My phone woke me at 8 the next morning. It was Ted Morrison, and he sounded stressed. "Aaron, we've got a problem." I sat up, instantly awake. "What now?" "Deborah filed a police report claiming you damaged HOA property when you cleared the fire access roads yesterday. She's saying you knocked down trees and caused significant environmental damage." "That's insane. I didn't knock down any trees." "I know. But she's got photos and she's filed a formal complaint. She's also calling an emergency board meeting tonight to terminate your contract." I dragged myself out of bed and spent the day going over every inch of the fire access roads, taking detailed photos and video. What I found was interesting. There were indeed 3 small trees down along one of the fire access roads, but they hadn't been knocked down by my plow. The snow and wind from the storm had taken them out. They were small aspens, maybe 3 inches in diameter, and you could clearly see that they'd fallen due to snow load on their branches. The bases showed no impact damage that would indicate being hit by a plow. I documented everything carefully, including wide-angle shots showing the natural fall pattern of the trees. The emergency board meeting that evening was packed. Word had spread through the community, and at least 60 homeowners showed up. Deborah called the meeting to order and immediately moved to terminate my contract. Based on photographic evidence, Mr. Lawson caused significant property damage while clearing snow yesterday. Several trees were destroyed, and we have grounds to terminate his contract for cause. I raised my hand. "Can I respond to these allegations?" "You'll have an opportunity to speak," Deborah said dismissively. She pulled up photos on the community center's projector. They showed the 3 downed aspens along the fire access road. To someone who didn't know what to look for, they could appear to have been hit by a plow. "As you can see," Deborah said, "Mr. Lawson's reckless plowing methods have resulted in damage to our natural areas. This is exactly what I warned about." "Are you finished?" I asked. "Do you have something to add?" I stood and pulled out my phone, connecting it to the projector. "These are photos and video I took this afternoon of the exact same trees. Note the snow load on the branches. Note the natural break pattern at the base. Note the complete absence of impact damage. These trees fell due to snow and wind, not because of plowing." I played a video I'd recorded, walking the area and narrating what the evidence showed. Several homeowners who knew something about trees and forestry nodded along. Moreover, I continued, these were 3-inch diameter aspens growing within 2 feet of a fire access road. They were going to come down in a storm eventually. If you look at the wider shots, you can see several other small trees in similar positions that fell during the same storm, nowhere near where I was plowing. One of the homeowners, a man I'd never met before, stood up. I hiked those fire access roads this afternoon after hearing about this meeting. Aaron's right. There are fallen trees all over the place from that storm. It was windy as hell up there. Another homeowner chimed in. I've watched Aaron plow for years. He's always been careful. This feels like a witch hunt. Deborah's face was flushed. We have an obligation to protect our community's natural resources. No, you have an obligation to make sure our roads are safe and our homes are accessible, said a woman near the front. I'm getting really tired of this vendetta against our snow plow guy. Ted Morrison cleared his throat. Deborah, I think it's clear that the trees fell due to the storm, not Aaron's plowing. I don't see grounds for contract termination. Sandra Chen looked uncomfortable. I agree with Ted. The evidence suggests natural causes. Deborah looked around the room, clearly realizing she didn't have support. Fine. The contract stands, but I'm formally requesting that Mr. Lawson exercise greater caution in the future. I exercise appropriate caution every time I plow, I said. That's not going to change. The meeting broke up with clusters of homeowners talking among themselves. Several came up to shake my hand and apologize for the situation. One couple even asked if I had availability to plow their driveway separately, outside the HOA contract. As I was leaving, a homeowner named Patricia Evans caught up with me. She was in her 60s, a retired teacher who'd lived in Pine Ridge since the development opened. Aaron, can I talk to you for a minute? Sure. I'm gathering signatures for a petition to recall Deborah from the board. We need 20% of homeowners to trigger a recall election. I've already got 40 signatures. Are you interested in signing? I'm not a homeowner here, so I don't think I can. Right, of course. But I wanted you to know that a lot of us appreciate what you do, and we're not going to let Deborah drive you away. She's been a nightmare since she got elected. This thing with you is just the latest. I appreciate that. Honestly, I just want to do my job without drama. You should be able to. We're working on fixing the problem. Over the next 3 weeks, Patricia and her group collected enough signatures to force a recall election. Deborah fought it, claiming procedural irregularities, but Sandra Chen, ironically, confirmed that the petition met all legal requirements. The recall election was scheduled for early February. In the meantime, we had another major storm and tensions were running high. This storm was a monster. 26 inches over 2 days, with temperatures dropping below zero. It was some of the most challenging plowing conditions I'd seen in years. My crew worked in shifts, and we brought in additional equipment just to keep up. Pine Ridge took us nearly 12 hours to fully clear. The fire access roads were particularly challenging because of the depth and the wind created drifts. At one point, on the steepest section of the upper fire access road, my truck got stuck in a drift that had packed in like concrete. It took us 2 hours with a second truck and chains to extract it and finish clearing the road. I was running on coffee and adrenaline by the time we finished at 11 at night. My crew was exhausted. We'd been out for almost 36 hours straight, grabbing cat naps when we could. The next morning, I got a call from Steve Martinez at the fire department. Aaron, we had a medical emergency in Pine Ridge last night, upper section near the 3rd fire access road. My stomach dropped. What happened? Elderly man, heart attack. Ambulance took the main roads up, but they were still partially blocked because of the storm severity. We sent a second unit up the fire access road to get to him faster. Your crew had just finished clearing it. We got there in time. He's going to make it. I sat down, suddenly aware of how tired I was. That's good. That's really good. Yeah. Look, I wanted you to know that your work probably saved his life. If that fire access road had been blocked, we would have been delayed by at least another 10 minutes, maybe more. With a heart attack, that could have been the difference. Just doing my job, Steve. I know. But I'm going to make sure the HOA board knows what happened. They need to understand that this isn't abstract. This is life and death. Steve sent a letter to the HOA board and attended their next regular meeting to personally explain what had happened. I heard about it from Ted Morrison. Steve laid it out pretty clearly, Ted told me over the phone. He described the emergency response, explained how the fire access road made the difference, and specifically credited your crew with potentially saving a life by clearing that road in extremely difficult conditions. How did Deborah react? She was quiet. For once, she didn't have much to say. I think even she understood that she was on the wrong side of this. The recall election was held on a Tuesday in mid-February. I didn't attend the vote count, but Patricia called me that evening. Deborah's out. It wasn't even close. 68% voted to recall her. Wow. Who's taking over as president? We're having a special election in 2 weeks, but Ted Morrison is interim president. I think he'll probably win the permanent position. Ted's good people. He is. And Aaron, I can promise you that things are going to be different. No more harassment. No more ridiculous fines. We appreciate what you do. Ted did win the permanent position as HOA president. His first action was to issue a formal apology to me on behalf of the board for the treatment I'd received. He also had the board pass a resolution affirming that my snow removal methods met all community requirements, and that the fire access roads would be maintained in accordance with fire department specifications, with aesthetic concerns being secondary to public safety. You'd think that would be the end of the story. It wasn't. In late March, as the snow was finally melting, I got a call from a sheriff's deputy named Frank Coleman. Mr. Lawson, I need to ask you some questions about Pine Ridge HOA finances. Okay, what's this about? We're investigating some irregularities in the HOA's accounts. Your name came up because of the fine you received last year. Can you come down to the station? I met with Deputy Coleman that afternoon. He explained that when the new board took over after Deborah's recall, they'd done a detailed audit of the HOA's finances. What they found was concerning. The $5,000 fine you received, Coleman said, was deposited into the HOA's account. That part was proper. But then, 3 days later, $5,000 was withdrawn and transferred to a personal account belonging to Deborah Kramer. She stole the fine money. That's what we're investigating. The notation on the withdrawal said it was for consulting fees related to environmental compliance. But there's no record of any environmental consulting work being done. No contract, no invoices, nothing. How much money are we talking about total? So far, we've identified about $35,000 in questionable transfers over the 6 weeks she was president. Your fine was part of it, but there were also payments to her personal accounts for various services that don't appear to have actually been rendered. I sat back, processing this. She was using the HOA as her personal piggy bank. That's what it looks like. We'll need to complete the investigation, but I wanted to talk to you since you were directly involved with one of the transactions. Whatever you need from me, I'm happy to help. The investigation took about 6 weeks. During that time, deputies interviewed dozens of Pine Ridge homeowners, reviewed all the HOA financial records, and eventually obtained Deborah's personal banking records with a court order. What they found was worse than initial reports suggested. Deborah had embezzled nearly $60,000 during her brief time as HOA president. She'd created fake invoices for environmental consulting, landscaping services, and administrative work. She'd paid herself a salary despite the HOA bylaws specifying that board positions were volunteer. She'd authorized payments to companies she owned without disclosing the conflict of interest. In May, Deborah Kramer was arrested and charged with theft, embezzlement, and fraud. The arrest made the local news, and I won't lie, there was a certain satisfaction in seeing her mugshot on the Steamboat Springs pilot website. The criminal case moved slowly, as these things do. Deborah hired an expensive lawyer from Denver and fought the charges. The case went to trial in September. I was called as a witness. The prosecutor, an assistant district attorney named Michael Torres, asked me to describe the situation with the $5,000 fine. She fined you for clearing emergency access roads using industry standard methods. That's correct. And this was after you'd been clearing those roads successfully for 12 years. Yes. What happened to that $5,000 fine? The HOA board rescinded it after the fire department intervened and explained that my methods were appropriate and necessary for public safety. But before it was rescinded, the money was deposited into the HOA account. According to the letter I received, yes, I never actually paid it. Did you authorize any payment to Deborah Kramer for environmental consulting? No. I had no idea she'd taken money from the HOA using my fine as justification. The trial lasted 4 days. Multiple Pine Ridge homeowners testified about irregular financial transactions. The HOA's accountant testified that the records showed clear evidence of embezzlement. Deborah's own bank records showed deposits corresponding with withdrawals from the HOA account. Deborah's defense was that she was entitled to compensation for the extra work she was doing as HOA president, and that the environmental consulting fees were legitimate payments for her time researching compliance issues. The jury didn't buy it. They convicted her on all charges after deliberating for less than 3 hours. The judge sentenced her to 4 years in prison and ordered her to pay full restitution of the embezzled funds, plus damages. Since she'd spent most of the money and couldn't immediately pay it back, the HOA placed a lien on her Pine Ridge property. I attended the sentencing hearing. As Deborah was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, she looked right at me. I couldn't read her expression. Anger, maybe, or regret. Probably both. Outside the courthouse, Patricia Evans and several other Pine Ridge homeowners were waiting. "Justice," Patricia said simply. "Yeah," I agreed. Ted Morrison came over. "Aaron, the board wants to do something for you. You've been patient with us through all of this craziness, and we appreciate it." "Ted, you don't need to do anything. I'm just glad it's resolved. We're giving you a bonus. $5,000, the same amount as the fine she tried to stick you with. And we're renewing your contract for another 3 years with a cost of living increase." I appreciate that. We also want to put up a plaque at the community center, recognizing the snow removal crews who maintain our emergency access roads. We've taken it for granted for too long. That plaque went up in November, right before the next snow season. It's a simple bronze plate mounted near the entrance to the community center. In appreciation of the snow removal professionals who maintain safe access for our community and emergency services. My name's on it, along with my crew members. It's a nice gesture. The winter after Deborah's conviction was busy but uneventful. We had a heavy snow year with several major storms, and I cleared Pine Ridge's roads, including the fire access routes, without any drama. The new board never questioned my methods. Homeowners often stopped to thank me when they saw me plowing. In February, I got a call from a guy named Don Fletcher who lived in Pine Ridge. He'd been following my situation from the beginning. "Aaron, I'm organizing a community appreciation event for essential service providers. We want to recognize the people who keep this community running. Will you come?" "Sure, I guess." The event was held at the community center on a Saturday afternoon. They'd invited snow removal contractors, utility workers, postal carriers, fire department personnel, and various other folks who did the unglamorous work of keeping a mountain community functional. There were maybe 100 people there. Ted Morrison gave a speech about how the previous year's controversies had made the community reflect on what really mattered. "We got distracted by aesthetics and property values," Ted said. "We forgot that what makes a community work isn't perfectly pristine landscapes. It's the people who show up at 3 in the morning when it's snowing sideways. It's the people who make sure we can get to the hospital when we need to. It's the people who do difficult, often thankless work to keep us safe and comfortable." Steve Martinez from the fire department spoke too. He talked about the importance of emergency access, and specifically mentioned the night his crew had saved the heart attack victim by using the fire access road. That road was clear because Aaron Lawson and his crew had been out in brutal conditions all day and night, Steve said. They were exhausted. It would have been easy to leave that last road until morning, but they didn't. They finished the job. And because of that, a man went home to his family. After the speeches, there was food and socializing. Multiple homeowners came up to shake my hand and thank me. Some apologized for not speaking up sooner when Deborah was causing problems. One conversation stood out. An older woman named Margaret Foster approached me. "I need to apologize," she said. "When Deborah was pushing to fine you, I supported her. I thought she had a point about protecting the environment. I didn't understand the realities of what you were doing. It's okay. It worked out. It's not okay. I should have listened better. I should have asked questions instead of just going along with someone who sounded confident. I learned something from this whole mess." "What's that?" "That the people doing the actual work usually know better than the people just talking about the work," I laughed. "That's pretty true." The event wrapped up around 6. As I was leaving, Patricia Evans caught me. "Aaron, one more thing. We're starting a community newsletter, and we want to include a column where service providers can explain what they do and what community members should know. Would you be willing to write something about snow removal?" "I'm not much of a writer." "Just talk about what you do and why you do it that way. People are curious now. They want to understand." I ended up writing a short piece for the newsletter explaining the challenges of mountain snow removal, the considerations that go into deciding where to push snow, and the importance of emergency access. It was published in the March newsletter, and I got probably 30 emails from homeowners saying they'd learned something or that they had a new appreciation for the work. Spring came, my plows went into storage, and I shifted to my summer work, which was mostly property maintenance and some construction projects. Life returned to normal. The story could have ended there, but there was one last piece to wrap up. In June, I was working on a retaining wall project when I got a call from Richard Foster, the lawyer who'd advised me during the initial fine controversy. "Aaron, interesting development. Deborah Kramer's Pine Ridge property is being sold to satisfy the restitution order. The HOA has first option to purchase it to recover some of their losses. They're wondering if you have any interest in buying it." "Me? Why would I want Deborah's house? It's actually a nice property. 3 bedrooms, great views near the upper fire access road." and they're willing to sell it to you below market value as a thank you for how you handled everything. I thought about it. I'd been renting a small house in town for years, and I'd sometimes thought about buying something. But Deborah's house, that feels weird, Richard. I understand. But the house didn't do anything wrong. It's just a house, and you'd be helping the HOA recover funds faster. Let me think about it. I drove up to look at the property a few days later. It was a nice place, I had to admit. Big windows looking out at the valley, good layout, and the location was convenient to a lot of my work. The fact that it had been Deborah's felt strange, but Richard was right. It was just a house. I ended up buying it. The HOA sold it to me for about 15% below market value, which meant they recovered funds faster and I got a good deal. I moved in August. The first time it snowed that next winter, I had a surreal moment. I was plowing the upper section of Pine Ridge, and I cleared the road right past my own house. I stopped for a minute, looking at the fire access road that wound up the hill behind my property. This was the road that had caused so much trouble. The road that had led to fines, threats, investigations, and ultimately a criminal conviction. Now I lived right next to it, and I'd be maintaining it for years to come. There was something poetic about that, I thought. Ted Morrison called me later that day. "How's the new place?" "Good. Still getting settled in." Strange how things work out, isn't it? A year ago, the HOA was trying to fine you out of existence. Now you're a homeowner in the community. Yeah, it's weird, but good weird. We're having a board meeting next week. You should come. As a homeowner, you're welcome to attend and participate. I might just do that. I did attend that meeting and several others over the following months. It was interesting being on the other side of things, seeing how the HOA operated from the inside. The new board was functional and reasonable. They focused on actual issues like road maintenance, snow removal contracts, and community facilities. There was no drama, no petty power plays, just practical governance. In December, they asked me to join the Architectural Review Committee, which evaluated requests for home modifications and additions. I almost laughed. You want me on the committee that approves changes to homes, after everything that happened? You've got practical knowledge about how things work on a mountain property, Ted said. And you've proven you can handle difficult situations professionally. We'd be lucky to have you. I joined the committee. It was actually interesting work, helping homeowners plan projects in ways that were practical and compliant with reasonable regulations. One day in January, almost exactly 2 years after the initial fine, I was reviewing an application from a homeowner who wanted to expand their driveway. The proposal showed pushing some dirt and vegetation to create more parking space. This is going to create drainage issues, I noted. And they're proposing to remove more vegetation than necessary. We should ask them to revise the plan. The committee agreed and sent the application back with suggestions for modifications that would achieve the homeowner's goal while minimizing environmental impact. As we wrapped up the meeting, I had a thought. 2 years ago, Deborah had been obsessed with protecting Pine Ridge's natural beauty, to the point of trying to fine me for clearing snow in the only practical way possible. Now here I was, actually helping to protect the community's environment by ensuring construction projects were done thoughtfully. The difference was approach. Deborah had been rigid and punitive, more concerned with control than actual outcomes. The current board tried to work with people, finding solutions that balanced different needs. That's what good governance looks like, I realized. Not rigid enforcement of rules for their own sake, but practical problem solving that serves the community's real needs. I was still plowing snow for Pine Ridge, still pushing snow off the fire access roads into the natural terrain below, still doing the same work I'd done for 15 years. But now, I was also a homeowner, a committee member, and part of the community in a deeper way. My house looks out at the mountains I've been plowing for years. Every time it snows, I watch the flakes accumulate on the fire access road behind my property. Then I gear up, get in my truck, and go clear it. The snow piles up in the natural terrain downslope, exactly where it should go. It melts in the spring, feeds the groundwater, nourishes the vegetation. The aspens and pines grow back thick every year. The road stays clear and passable for emergency vehicles. It works because it's practical. It works because it prioritizes what matters, safety and function over aesthetic perfection. Sometimes I wonder what Deborah thinks about now, sitting in prison. Does she understand where she went wrong? Does she regret the choices she made? Or does she still believe she was right, and that everyone else just didn't understand her vision? I'll never know. She'll be out in a couple more years, and she'll face a world where her professional reputation is destroyed and her financial situation is ruined. That's a heavy price for what started as a petty dispute about snow removal methods. The whole situation taught me things I probably needed to learn. I'd always focused narrowly on doing good work and keeping my head down. I avoided conflict and drama. That's generally a good approach, but there are times when you have to stand up for yourself. Times when you have to say no to unreasonable demands, even if it creates short-term conflict. If I just paid that initial fine, if I tried to find some impossible alternative method, if I'd let Deborah push me around, things wouldn't have ended well. I probably would have lost the contract anyway, and Deborah's embezzlement would have continued unchecked. By standing firm, by refusing to accept an unjust fine, I inadvertently exposed a much larger problem. Sometimes doing the right thing has consequences you never expect. I finished plowing Pine Ridge late one evening in February, my second winter living here. It had been a long day, and I was looking forward to getting home, having dinner, and crashing in front of the fire. As I drove past the community center, I saw the bronze plaque near the entrance, barely visible in the snow and darkness. I stopped for a moment and looked at it. My name was on that plaque, along with my crew. Recognition for doing work that should be invisible when it's done right. Nobody notices good snow removal until it's not there, but Pine Ridge noticed. They learned to appreciate the unglamorous work that keeps a community functional. They learned it the hard way, through conflict and scandal and ultimately criminal prosecution. But they learned. I drove home, parked my truck in the driveway, and walked into my house. Through the back windows, I could see the fire access road winding up the mountain, clear and passable, ready for any emergency. I'd cleared that road hundreds of times over 15 years. I'd been fined for it, threatened over it, and ultimately vindicated because of it. Now I lived next to it, and I'd keep clearing it for years to come. It's just a road. But it's also a reminder of what matters, doing good work, standing up for what's right, and serving the community even when the community doesn't always understand or appreciate what you're doing. The snow will keep falling. I'll keep plowing. Emergency vehicles will keep using those fire access roads, and life will continue in Pine Ridge, hopefully with a little more wisdom and a lot less drama than before. That bronze plaque at the community center says it all. Appreciation for the people who maintain safe access for the community. That's what it's really about. Not property values or aesthetic perfection or control. Just safety, function, and community. I learned that lesson. Pine Ridge learned that lesson. And somewhere in a prison in Colorado, maybe Deborah Kramer learned it too. The snow continues to fall in Steamboat Springs, and I continue to clear it. That's my job. That's my life. And I wouldn't have it any other way.